For those of you just joining, welcome to our info session for the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan. People are still entering the room, and we're just going to give them a couple of minutes. We'll start at 6:35. Thank you. Okay. I think we've got a good number of people who have joined us, and we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Eric Botsford, and I'm the director of the Manhattan office here at the Department of City Planning. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us for this information session on the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan, or as we like to call it, MSMX. We're thrilled to have you with us as we move into this next phase of the planning process. The MSMX plan is all about laying the groundwork for dynamic and vibrant neighborhoods where housing coexists alongside offices, the creative sector, and a variety of other uses. It's about making Midtown South a place where living, working, making, and creating all come together seamlessly. Tonight, we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to start by recapping what we've learned during our engagement efforts and our research and show you how that feedback has shaped our approach to planning in Midtown South. And this is an exciting moment as it's also the first time that we're presenting our draft plan before we officially kick off the land use review process. And finally, we'll walk you through what steps come after this meeting. And most importantly, we'll be opening the floor to hear your questions, thoughts, and comments. Tonight's meeting is just the first of many opportunities to come to engage with us as the MSMX plan takes shape. We really value your input and hope that you'll continue to be part of this journey with us. Before we get started, I want to extend a welcome to City Planning's Director, Dan Gorodnick, who will share some opening remarks. After that, we'll be honored to have Councilmember Eric Botcher, Councilmember Keith Powers, and Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine providing comments, who are joining us as well. Dan?
All right. Thanks, Eric. And hi, everybody. I'm Dan Gorodnick, Director of the Department of City Planning. Thank you so much for attending tonight's information session on our Midtown South Mixed Use Plan. We really appreciate your spending your Wednesday evening with us. As you all know, Midtown South is one of the most centrally located transit and job-rich neighborhoods in New York City going back for generations. It's home to more than 7,000 businesses and 135,000 jobs, and it is a quick train ride from other commercial hubs like Midtown, Financial District, and Long Island City. But unfortunately, Midtown South faces a number of challenges that prevent it from truly thriving. Some are of more recent origin, like an elevated level of office and commercial vacancies following the pandemic. Others date back further, like the decades-old zoning rules that have prevented the construction of new housing in this community. These rules have denied New Yorkers the opportunity to live close to jobs and transit and made it much harder for the neighborhood to adapt to shifting work patterns. As our city faces a deep housing shortage, we've been talking about this a lot, with a vacancy rate of only 1.41% it is clear that we need to change course, and that is exactly what the Midtown South mixed-use plan would allow us to do. This community-driven proposal will help to create a more vibrant 24/7 neighborhood with a dynamic mix of commercial, manufacturing, and residential uses. It would spur the creation of new housing, including permanently income-restricted affordable homes in some of the highest density parts of Manhattan. It also supports Midtown South's economy by permitting a wide range of non-residential uses, including light manufacturing, office space, and retail as a way to bolster jobs. And it includes important investments in infrastructure and amenities like public open space. After we released a draft approach in March, we had a big housing win in Albany with the removal of the antiquated residential FAR cap, which has made it possible for us to release an updated plan that better reflects the potential for new homes and income-restricted homes in this neighborhood. With the FAR cap lifted, I am happy to share that we intend to put these new tools to work for the very first time as part of the plan that we are sharing tonight. This is precisely the area of the city where we should enable our highest density residential buildings, centrally located, with great amenities and access to transit. So we look forward to sharing these details with you tonight. It's a key step as we move toward our public review of this proposal. This plan was only possible thanks to all of the collaboration and input that we received from the Midtown South community. So thank you. We are deeply appreciative for your continued engagement in this vital work. I also want to thank the elected officials whose leadership has been absolutely crucial here. They have been amazing at every step of this process. Great leaders on housing, great leaders for this neighborhood, for the borough and for the city. Our borough president, Mark Levine, council members Eric Botcher and Keith Powers. They have been tremendous. Thank you, gentlemen. We really appreciate you. And I also want to thank, of course, the brilliant and dedicated Department of City Planning staff for getting us to this point. Together, I am confident that we are going to set Midtown South on a brighter and more inclusive and more prosperous path. So again, we thank you so much for spending Wednesday evening with us. And I turn it back to you, Eric. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dan. Next, I want to turn to Councilmember Botcher to provide remarks. Welcome, Councilmember.
I think Borough President Levine is the senior official.
You're very kind. Go ahead, Eric. It's all good.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. I really want to thank all the residents and community board members and business owners and all the stakeholders who are out here tonight to discuss this potential rezoning of these very important parts of Manhattan. And I feel a very deep responsibility to get this right as we try to solve for a few challenges, one of which is the severe housing shortage in New York City, including the shortage of deeply affordable income restricted housing. In our district, we're getting calls every day in my office from local residents, seniors who are no longer able to walk up the stairs in their walk-up apartments, people who are being priced out of their homes and who want to know what their options are with respect to affordable housing in our district. And we unfortunately have to tell them over and over again that there really aren't many options. We had one new building on 23rd and 8th with 50 or so affordable income restricted units in it, and they had tens of thousands of applicants for those 50 units. That's a problem we need to solve for. On the other end, we've got a swaths of Manhattan that don't allow for residential use, commercial and manufacturing only, which is, as we know now, successful neighborhoods are a mix of uses: live, work, play 24/7 neighborhoods with residential, commercial, light manufacturing. So I'm really happy that we're looking at what we can do to allow for residential in these neighborhoods, including the construction of the creation of lots and lots of income restricted affordable units. And the challenge is going to be to get the right mix of the retention of commercial and light manufacturing. We want conversions and new construction. We have to find that right mix, and that's going to involve collaborating with all the stakeholders involved: residents, industry representatives, business owners, everyone who cares and has a stake in this neighborhood. That's what successful city planning is. That's how the right policies emerge. So I am very much looking forward to working with all of you here over the next year and change to really get it right and create a win for New Yorkers. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this.
Thank you so much, council member, and apologies for a president. Happy to turn to you next.
No apologies due, and now I feel bad bumping council member Powers from the line. But I am going to be brief because I want to hear the presentation and I want the public to be able to ask questions. But I have to say, when I talk to people in land use, when I talk to people in Manhattan who are not familiar with the intricacies of land use, and I tell them that there is a big part of Midtown which is zoned for manufacturing, the reaction is generally like, wait, what? How can that be? And then I explain, well, the last time we had a comprehensive rezoning in New York City was in 1961. And of course, back then there was a lot of manufacturing, and people get it. And I think people get that we're in a very different world in 2024. And we do thankfully still have a small amount of precious and important manufacturing in this district, but that most of the space in the buildings that are there is either being used for other things or is empty. And that challenge represents a huge opportunity in the midst of this terrible housing crisis with Councilmember Bottcher so eloquently described. And the numbers are really pretty remarkable. I'm sure DCP will get into these details, but I think roughly we have the potential to create something like 9,000 or more homes, and critically something like 2,700 or maybe more like 3,000 that are affordable homes. And those are remarkable numbers. I hope people really think about what it would mean to have about 2,700 families get an affordable home in one of the most transit-rich and employment-rich neighborhoods in America. I know we have a lot of community board members here, and in community boards, we often have months and even years of work on projects that could yield 50 affordable units or 100 affordable units. That's the scale we're used to dealing with. And what we have here is so far beyond that. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is a once-in-a-generation thing in Manhattan. I can't think of what would compete with it or what has of late. This is really big. I want to acknowledge concerns that I have and that others I know share about protecting that precious legacy garment manufacturing sector that, while small, is still important, and we don't want to lose what we have. I've also heard questions from an urban planning perspective about good public space and retaining the street wall, and if we're going to have what are known as POPs, privately occupied, privately owned public spaces, will that be those kind of windswept 1980 plazas that really none of us like? So I'm sure DCP will have answers on that. We do care about how the built environment will feel from the street. And while I'm not sure it's exactly a topic for tonight, I am very aware of the challenges that this neighborhood faces, even beyond housing, that are related to the health of the public realm and public safety challenges that we have, particularly in the West 30s. And I do think that having a vibrant 24/7 mixed use neighborhood would also yield real benefits on the quality of life there for people who live there and work there and visit. I just think it would make for a healthier neighborhood overall, even beyond what we gain in housing and other purposes. So this is really an exciting conversation, the beginning of a conversation where we want to hear from all stakeholders as this process is shaped in the months ahead. And I'm really excited to kick it off tonight. So thank you to City Planning and to my colleagues. Back to you.
Thank you, Borough President. And finally, turning to Councilmember Powers.
Hello there. As you can see, I'm not in Midtown South. I am actually walking here on the street, but I wanted to stop in and just say hello to everyone. City Council Member Keith Powers here. Just wanted to echo so much what's been said already by the Borough President and Councilmember Botcher and Chairman Gorodnick, which is that this is an exciting opportunity and I think a great opportunity for Manhattan and the whole city here. And what I'm most excited about is not only the opportunity to really capture the moment when it comes to conversions that so many New Yorkers have been talking about, but also to drive affordable housing and to deliver results for a neighborhood that could use more 24/7 life and activity there. And so very much looking forward to starting this process with everyone and eager to hear from all the stakeholders here about their input, how to make sure as we start this plan and we get it all the way through the process that we do it right. But I think everyone understands that we are in a major housing crisis right now. We have a 1% vacancy rate here in the city, and we have lots of opportunities to help struggling office buildings to continue to maintain themselves by converting to residential. Those feel very obvious, I think, to all of us. So now the question is, how do we get the plan right? And that's where we're calling everyone on in today to offer your insights and your input for how we deliver the best available plan here as we move forward in the future. So I'll leave it at that. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the team from City Planning, my colleagues for their thoughtfulness and hard work here, but very much looking forward to hearing everyone's input as we move forward. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember. And thank you again, Dan, Councilmember Botcher, Borough President Levine, Councilmember Powers. We've been really happy to have you along the way as we've developed this plan, and very happy to have you here with us tonight. So with that, let's dive in. I'll hand it over to my colleagues from the MSMX team who will walk us through tonight's program, starting with Ezra.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for the intro. Hi, everybody. I'm Ezra Moser. I'm a planner and team leader with DCP's Manhattan office, and I'm excited to be presenting to you today. So let's start by laying out how today's meeting will unfold. Over the next hour and a half, the MSMX team, supported by our many colleagues working here in the background, will present the MSMX plan. We aim to spend the first 30 minutes sharing the details of the plan, and the rest of the time will be dedicated to hearing from you. Your questions, your thoughts, and feedback are incredibly important to us in shaping this proposal. So here's how you can participate. First, feel free to submit written questions at any point using Zoom's Q&A feature. Our team will be monitoring those closely throughout the session. Once the presentation portion wraps up, we will open up the floor for live questions. Simply raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to speak. And to respect different preferences and comfort levels, we will alternate between addressing written Q&A questions and live questions to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. And also, don't worry if you need to leave early. This meeting is being recorded, and you'll be able to catch up later on DCP's YouTube page or the MSMX website at midtownsouthplan.nyc. That's all one word, midtownsouthplan.nyc. All right. So before we dive in, I'd like to briefly introduce the MSMX team. The project's core team is comprised of planners and urban designers from DCP's Manhattan office. We're also joined by experts across the agency in zoning, land use, GIS, and community engagement who've all contributed to shaping this neighborhood plan. It's truly a team effort, and we couldn't have made it this far without everyone's collaboration. So for tonight, we want to first recap how your feedback and our research have shaped the MSMX plan so far. We'll introduce the draft plan, walk through the public review process, and explain how you can stay involved moving forward. Since our town hall in March, we've been fine-tuning the neighborhood plan based on your input, plus adapting to changes in state regulations around housing. A neighborhood plan like this is a balancing act. It's guided by community priorities, research, and broader citywide and agency goals. It covers a wide range of topics, including strategies and investments outside of zoning. But at this stage, we're focusing on developing a zoning proposal and the land use actions necessary to bring this plan to life. So we're excited to keep the conversation going tonight and take the next step together in planning for the future of Midtown South. So I'll give a broad overview of the plan area for those not familiar with Midtown South and the MSMX plan area. The plan area, which you can see highlighted in yellow on the pullout image here, is centrally located in Midtown South with exceptional transit, jobs, and amenities access. The common thread that ties all four of these areas that you can see together is that they have decades-old manufacturing zoning that doesn't allow housing, despite being surrounded by mixed-use neighborhoods. For those who may be new to the MSMX plan, let me just start with a quick overview of the plan area. So to give you more context, the total plan area covers roughly 42 blocks across 4 distinct sections of Midtown South, which you can see outlined here on the map to the right. These areas are generally bordered by 40th Street to the north, 5th Avenue to the east, 23rd Street to the south, and 8th Avenue to the west. These 4 areas that are the MSMX plan area have incredible transit access with multiple subway lines, as well as Penn Station and the Port Authority bus terminal just steps away. And right in the center, connecting the 4 plan areas are Harold and Greeley squares, providing transit access and open space on the Midtown South doorstep. The southwest area that you can see here is partially covered. Oh, sorry, the southeast area is covered by the Madison Square North Historic and Ladies Mile Historic districts, which are visible in light purple. Again, this is the southeast portion in the bottom right hand of the map. So here's an aerial view of the MSMX plan area to help orient you even better. The northwest portion is just north of Penn Station and south of Times Square. The northeast portion is just south of Bryant Park. Moving south, the southeast portion extends from the Empire State Building towards Madison Square Park. And then finally, the southwest portion is just south of Madison Square Garden and Penn Station. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with the plan area, let's take a quick look at what we'll be covering tonight. We'll start by discussing why we're focusing on Midtown South, review the key insights from our engagement process and how that informed our plan priorities, and then introduce our draft plan for the first time. Then we'll guide you through the upcoming public review process and explain how you can stay involved. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for your questions. So first, let's get into the most important question. Why Midtown South and why now? Well, New York City has seen tremendous job growth over the last 2 decades. Housing development has not quite kept up. Most of the new affordable housing that has been built is concentrated in just a handful of neighborhoods. New York City faces a severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low, only 1.4%, which is far below a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with housing options. Because our housing demand is greater than our housing supply, New Yorkers are experiencing very high housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. Not having enough homes is also the direct cause of homelessness, with thousands of New Yorkers sleeping in the shelter system every night. At the same time, COVID-19 has changed the way New Yorkers work, commute, and shop. This shift has impacted the commercial office market significantly, with hybrid work reducing the demand for traditional office spaces. So as mentioned earlier, the MSMX plan area is located in one of the most transit-rich parts of the country, with 15 subway lines, PATH trains, the Long Island Railroad, NJ Transit, Amtrak, and commuter buses at the Port Authority bus terminal all within reach. The area is primed for accessibility. Considering the city's housing crisis, it's hard to justify the fact that housing isn't allowed in such a central, transit-rich area due to half-century-old zoning rules. That's why it's time for change and to create more housing options and make Midtown South a place where more New Yorkers can live, work, and thrive. So you've heard me mention zoning a few times now, so let's dive into some zoning basics. For those who might not be as familiar, zoning rules break the city into three main types: residential, commercial, and manufacturing. Each zone has specific rules which determine not only what types of buildings can be built and what they look like, but also the uses that are allowed within them. On the map, you'll notice red and yellow surrounding the MSMX plan area, which is outlined in dark black and shaded in purple. So these are high density residential and commercial zones that generally allow housing, adding a more mixed use neighborhood feel to those areas. Manufacturing zones are shown in purple, and again, with the MSMX plan area centrally featured, these tend to not allow housing. Now, the MSMX plan area is currently zoned as M1 manufacturing. M1 districts are often in areas set aside for lighter industrial and commercial uses and typically serve as a buffer between residential areas and heavier industrial zones. So let's zoom a little closer into the MSMX plan area itself. Much of this area was zoned M16 decades ago, meaning that it was designated for light industrial and commercial uses. There's also a small portion in the southwest area marked M16D, where a 2011 zoning update allowed for housing on smaller lots while still prioritizing commercial and light industrial uses on larger lots. In M16 zones, you'll see uses like warehouses, retail stores, office spaces, entertainment venues, and manufacturing that doesn't create spillover nuisances. However, some uses are restricted, such as housing, schools, libraries, museums, and heavy industrial operations. So knowing the current zoning doesn't allow housing in the MSMX area, it's not surprising that there are relatively few homes here compared to nearby neighborhoods. In fact, there are only about 2,300 homes in the plan area versus 74,000 homes within a 10-minute walk. And that's in one of the city's most transit accessible, job dense areas. Most of the homes you do see here come from zoning variances or special exceptions, such as being approved by the Board of Standards and Appeals. Other housing has been allowed under the state's loft law or existed even before zoning regulations. If you look at this map, you'll see how clear this difference is. The dark red lots just outside the MSMX area include large amounts of housing, while within the plan area, housing is sparse. This absence of residential life changes the feel of the area, especially after work hours when there are fewer people on the streets, fewer patrons for the area's businesses, and generally fewer eyes on the street. It definitely impacts the area's quality of life. So before we move into density specifics, let's clarify a term, floor area ratio, or FAR. FAR is a standard measure of density representing usable floor space rather than, say, a building's height. It's calculated by dividing a building's total floor area by the area of the lot that it occupies. So the higher the FAR, the denser the building. On the map, dark blue represents lower density buildings, while yellow marks the highest density buildings. In this case on the map, the yellow buildings are built to over 17.5 FAR. So to help you visualize this, let's compare two buildings in the surrounding area. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with the New York Public Library next to Bryant Park. This iconic building has an FAR of around 1.3. Compare that with another iconic higher density building nearby, the Flatiron Building, which is around 21 FAR. But the area, which has a lot of older loft style buildings built prior to when the existing M16 10 FAR zoning was put into place, these buildings are very dense. These are buildings of 20, 30, even up to 40 FAR. These buildings are not uncommon. Here are just a few of them and what they look like in the Midtown context. And here is a close-up of built density within the MSMX plan. The map on your right shows existing densities, and as you can see, the areas in the warmer colors are overbuilt, and you can see a lot of yellow, which is again the 17.5 FAR or higher, in and around especially the northern two areas. The southern two quadrants, while generally less dense than the northern two, are still pretty marbled, with lots of low, medium, and high density buildings interspersed together. And then we do notice that the densities begin to decrease as you move south in the southwest area towards Chelsea, as you can see with the purple and blue colors. But the existing high density is really no surprise given that we're in Midtown Manhattan, and this high density is part of the urban fabric of the area. So with all this context on Midtown South, here are the goals for the MSMX plan. First, we want to foster 24/7 mixed-use neighborhoods in the area, but we want to balance that with vibrant economic activity. This means creating opportunities for new housing, especially affordable housing, while supporting the vibrant mix of businesses that already call this area home. Finally, our goal is to improve the quality of life by enhancing street activity and establishing more inviting public spaces where people can gather, relax, and enjoy the neighborhood day or night. I'm now going to pass it on to our Deputy Director, Nabila Malik, to review what we've heard and how that has informed our plan.
Thank you, Ezra. All right, we're excited to share some highlights from our community engagement efforts and show how your input is really shaping the direction of this neighborhood plan. So starting from our kickoff meeting last October through our town hall in March, we've worked hard to connect with as many of you as possible. And the feedback we received at the town hall and scoping meeting was really helpful in shaping our approach. Today, we're thrilled to introduce our draft plan before we kick off the ULURP public review process. Beyond public meetings, we conducted outreach through our website, weekly office hours, an online survey, and numerous site visits. We wanted a full view of Midtown South's needs, challenges, and opportunities, so we hosted 7 roundtable conversations with a mix of people, including housing advocates, residents, larger businesses, small business owners, real estate experts, and social service providers. If you're curious about the details of those discussions, we've posted summaries on our website, so definitely check those out. And of course, we're so grateful for your ongoing participation. Your on-the-ground insights are really essential to this planning effort. So from all of these conversations, 6 key community priorities emerged for Midtown South. First, we heard strong support for increasing housing options, including affordable housing through zoning changes and tax incentives. But that housing also needs to be balanced with businesses to foster economic vibrancy and diversity. Then we heard about buildings and neighborhood to ensure new development and other changes contribute positively to the neighborhood's character. Another priority is to encourage more local retail and services to create a more 24/7 neighborhood. And of course, improving the public realm to enhance connectivity and safety was a priority for most of you. So these 6 community priorities became a roadmap for us and directly shaped our planning approach for MSMX. We were able to take these 6 community priorities and distill them into 3 plan priorities for MSMX, including creating vibrant mixed-use communities, supporting critical economic activity, and enhancing neighborhood character. These priorities really capture what we heard from you and paired with our research takeaways form the core of our plan. Now we'll walk through how we developed our draft plan with those priorities in mind. Okay, so let's dive into the details of how we've put together a plan that builds on each priority, creating a cohesive vision for Midtown South. Our first priority is fostering vibrant mixed-use communities. So while Midtown South is already vibrant and lively during the day, adding more residents and diversifying the economy are key to keeping this energy alive during after work hours. To make this happen, we are proposing to rezone the area to allow housing along with a broad range of other uses. This change will allow us to require mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH, in Midtown South for the first time, requiring income-restricted affordable housing in all new residential developments and building conversions. Throughout the MSMX process, you may have heard us advocating for the state to lift its floor area restrictions, which had arbitrarily limited housing specifically to 12 FAR. We're very excited, as I'm sure you've heard multiple times, that since we last presented our draft approach in March, the state has lifted that cap, and we are now able to propose the highest density residential zoning districts R11 and R12, introduced by the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity proposal. We have also taken a broader look at the at the zoning in the plan area and immediately surrounding it to remove any existing restrictions on housing. And we're looking to expand the community facilities allowed in the area to include important amenities like libraries, museums, and schools, making this a true mixed-use neighborhood. So now on to our second priority, reinforcing Midtown South as a major regional employment hub to build on the thousands of jobs already here. We're doing this by mapping new mixed-use zoning districts that support commercial, wholesale, and light manufacturing uses, from office space to garment design to restaurants and retail. We are taking new zoning tools created through the recently adopted City of Yes for Economic Opportunity that allow for higher commercial and light manufacturing densities that really fit the existing character of Midtown South. The newly adopted zoning changes would also allow for expanded commercial uses. And of course, we are exploring non-zoning tools to further support economic growth across sectors. And the final plan priority focuses on enhancing neighborhood character. So we all know and have heard that the public realm is very important, but we also see the challenges and constraints in making transformative changes in Midtown. That's why it was important for us to incentivize transit improvements and more public spaces for the benefit of the community. We are also recommending urban design rules that encourage new buildings to reflect the existing and beloved loft style character and contribute to an inviting streetscape. And of course, making the neighborhood safe and welcoming for everyone is essential. So we'll be working with partner agencies on ways to improve public safety and overall quality of life. While zoning helps make the area livable, non-zoning tools will also be key to addressing quality of life concerns specifically. So with that, I'll now hand it over to Andy, one of our MSMX co-leads, to walk us through the details of the draft plan.
Thanks, Nabila. So now, based on that very long introductory planning approach that we talked about, we've drafted a plan that we think goes a really long way towards achieving all of those priorities. And I just want to remind everyone that what you're about to see is a draft. It's exactly that. It'll be refined over the next few months as it moves through the public review process, and we gather additional stakeholder feedback and comments. So our zoning proposal replaces the existing manufacturing districts with new high-density mixed-use districts. If you joined us previously for the March Town Hall, you'll remember that our preliminary approach proposed going up to 12 FAR per residential. And now, like we mentioned, that the state has lifted that cap, we're able to map newer high density R11 and R12 districts. We're still proposing a series of paired manufacturing and residential districts to make sure that this area continues again to support that healthy mix of uses. And we want to make sure that all types of businesses, whether that's manufacturing, wholesalers, floral shops, and emerging sectors like tech, can continue to call Midtown South home. So all of the proposed paired districts permit really the broadest possible range of light manufacturing, commercial, residential, and community facility uses, and only differ in the densities that they allow. And I'm going to walk through each one of these districts in a little bit more detail. So starting with the dark blue areas in the two northern quadrants and part of the southwest area that wraps around the future Penn Station expansion, we intend to map an M19A R12 district that would allow a non-residential FAR of 15 and a residential FAR of 18. And as we showed in the earlier map, these areas really have some of the highest existing built densities and are also surrounded by high density buildings. So we think this proposed FAR is appropriate here. So moving to the southeast and a small portion of the southwest shown in purple, this would be mapped with an M18A R12 district. These are areas we think can really support that higher density of 18 FAR residential just due to the existing context, but we've lowered the commercial density to 12 to preference residential, just recognizing that these areas do have a more residential character already. And lastly, we're mapping an M18A R11 district in the remaining southwest shown in light blue. And this pairing will allow 12 FAR for non-residential uses and 15 FAR per residential use. And this comparatively lower density reflects the fact that densities tend to taper off as you go south towards Chelsea. So one of the most exciting parts of this proposal is that it finally allows us to map mandatory inclusionary housing across the entire plan area. And this would be the first time MIH is mapped in Midtown. And like we said previously, this would require that all new residential development and conversions set aside between 20 to 30% of new residential floor area for permanently income restricted homes. We're also proposing a new special district with bespoke rules to help shape building forms and incentivize public realm improvements, and to ensure that those zoning changes are consistent with the rules in the surrounding areas. Currently, buildings larger than 70,000 square feet in the C64M district, just outside the plan area shown in this map in gray in the northwest, can't convert to residential, and we'll be removing this restriction. We also want to be mindful of the pedestrian experience and ensure that future development reflects the loft character, like Nabila mentioned. We heard from a lot of stakeholders about some recent development in the area, especially hotels that have sort of these shallow setbacks and create kind of an undesirable effect on street continuity and street life. So we're proposing to require that buildings maintain an active street front and line up at the street. We also plan on requiring a base height of between 6 and 15 stories with upper floors set back above the base. And the illustration on the right shows what future development could look like. The buildings with the darker outline are new developments with those higher densities that comply with building form rules to maintain the street line and set back above the base. So during our engagement, we heard from many, many stakeholders about the need to address the public realm. So we're working with our partner agencies like the Department of Transportation and Parks to identify new public realm investments while also using zoning mechanisms to encourage better outcomes. So our proposal incentivizes developments to provide public realm improvements by expanding the availability of the transit bonus, the outdoor POPs bonus, and the indoor POPs bonus to cover the entire rezoning area. All three of these tools have a review and approval process with DCP. The department works directly with developers to ensure that any resulting transit improvement or public space is commensurate with the bonus that's being sought, and the design is up to the highest standard. I also just want to note that even though these bonuses can be layered and used in combination, the maximum additional floor area a development could achieve is 20% above the base. So in summary, here are proposed zoning changes altogether. The paired manufacturing and residential districts will enable a dynamic mix of housing and businesses to achieve our planned priorities of having that 24/7 mixed-use neighborhood and supporting economic activity. We're expecting that this rezoning could result in as many as 9,700 homes in the area, with about 2,800 of which would be permanently affordable through MIH. And with the establishment of a new special district, we'll be able to shape those building forms and incentivize public realm improvements to again achieve that priority of enhancing neighborhood character. And besides the zoning and land use actions, the final plan could include other neighborhood planning components, and we're working with our other city agencies to identify specific capital and programmatic investments. So now I'm going to pass it over to Abby to talk about next steps in the environmental review and ULURP process.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm excited to share how you can stay involved in the public review process beyond today's meeting. Let's look at what's coming up next in the environmental review and ULURP processes so you can know exactly where and how you can participate. As you can see in the timeline, we're at the stage where we've developed a draft plan and are getting ready to begin public review. This part of the process will give you, the public, plenty of chances to share feedback and make your voice heard. I'll walk through the main steps of the environmental and land use processes so you know what each part of the graphic means and where the public input fits in. Our goal here is to help you feel prepared and informed about how you can get involved. And keep in mind too that this proposal isn't finalized. It's still evolving and being refined throughout this process. So environmental review comes with lots of jargon and acronyms, but what we really want to flag for you are all the opportunities you'll have to share your recommendations and ask questions. One key piece of this process is the City Environmental Quality Review, or SEQR, where we take a look at how a new land use proposal could impact the environment and neighborhood. Depending on the project, SEQR produces different types of reports. For the MSMX plan, we're working on an environmental impact statement, or EIS, which is the most comprehensive type of report. The first step in developing an EIS is setting a draft scope of work. This draft scope outlines what environmental aspects we need to study, things like traffic, transit, schools, and construction, to ensure a thorough neighborhood analysis. There's also a public scoping meeting where you can suggest what should or shouldn't be included in this analysis. If you're interested, you can find the MSMX draft scope of work on the department's zoning application portal, and a recording of our scoping meeting from April of this year is on our YouTube. After the scoping meeting, we review public comments and include them in the final scope of work. That scope sets us up to create the draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS, which is used to share data and potential mitigation measures with the public and decision makers. When the DEIS enters public review, you'll have another chance to comment on it as part of the ULURP process, which I'll explain in a bit. Before the proposal is voted on, we'll release a final environmental impact statement, or FEIS, incorporating the public comments we receive. Now let's talk about ULURP, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. ULURP is a standardized procedure for public review of land use applications and involves many participants, including yourselves, DCP, and the City Planning Commission, community boards, and your local elected officials. This process typically takes about 7 months. Certification is the first step in the ULURP process. The department will prepare a land use application that details the proposed plan and verify that everything is complete and ready for public review. Once it's certified at a City Planning Commission review session, we send it out to the affected community boards, which in this case is CB4 and CB5 for MSMX, the borough president, and the city council within 9 days. When the application reaches the community board, they're required to hold a public hearing, which you can attend and learn more and share your thoughts. The board has 60 days from referral to submit a recommendation. After that, the borough president has a chance to review and provide input within 30 days, along with the option of holding their own hearing. Keep in mind, this review covers both the land use application and the DEIS, so it's a comprehensive look at the proposal. After the community board and borough president have shared their feedback, the CPC will hold a public hearing. Anyone interested can attend and sign up to testify at the proposal and the DEIS, or testify on the proposal and the DEIS. The CPC considers all feedback, both written and verbal, before voting. They'll have the choice to approve with modifications, or disapprove the application within 60 days. All comments on the DEIS are reviewed as well, and the FEIS is issued 10 days before the CPC vote. If the CPC approves the application, it moves on to the City Council, which will also hold a public hearing before deciding to approve, modify, or disapprove the CPC's decision. The final stage is a brief mayoral review, and if everything goes through, the plan will be adopted with any adjustments made during the process. As you can see, there are plenty of opportunities here along the way for you to share your feedback. We encourage you all to stay engaged with the proposal as it moves through each step. And that concludes the presentation portion of tonight's event. Now on to what I always think is the best part of the program, which is hearing from you. As we open up the floor to your comments and questions, let's go over a few quick guidelines to keep our conversation running smoothly. To keep things clear and organized, everyone will remain muted until it's their turn to speak. You can raise your hand in Zoom to let us know that you'd like to comment or ask a question. We want to hear from as many people as possible, so please keep your comments or questions brief. If needed, I'll gently just remind you to wrap up. If you'd prefer to type your questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll be checking this live. And if your question isn't answered tonight, reach out to us at any time at Midtown South Plan at planning.nyc.gov. Let's just quickly run through your options for participating. If you're tuning in live on YouTube right now and want to join and ask a question or share a comment, head over to midtownsouthplan.nyc to register and join us live on Zoom. Or dial in using the numbers at the bottom of the screen and then press *9 to raise your hand. Here's how this is going to go. We're going to alternate between calling on a few people with raised hands and reading questions submitted via the Q&A feature. When we call on someone, we'll either use your name or the last 3 digits of your phone number to promote you to panelist so you can speak. And just a quick heads up, if we promote you to panelist, you may briefly feel like you've been kicked off of the call. Please don't worry. Just click join as panelist after the prompt, like the one you see on the screen now, appears, and you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you like. Make sure that you do not press stay as attendee. Just so you're aware, we're grouping similar questions together so we can address as many as possible. And a quick reminder, as we shared, we are just approaching the start of the public review process for this plan. There will still be many opportunities for you to add your voice to this process. Because we're at an early stage, we may not have every question tonight, but we are listening to your comments and questions, and we will do our best to address them as we continue to move through this process. All right. I am going to call on the first two people who have their hands raised. And looking at our screen, it looks like our first two folks are Jim Wright and Layla La Gisigo. Can we promote Jim now, please? Jim, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having this session. Jim Wright, I'm a resident of the Southeast District and also an architect. I'd like to go back as just a general background question on the zoning outline that's being proposed. Is it possible you could bring up that slide that shows the 4 districts, sub-districts, as well as the zoning within those districts?
We typically stay on this screen at this time, just for folks
it's going to be hard for people
participate.
to understand this question without seeing the zoning map. But it's these 4 districts, M districts, were identified for the rezoning. However, there's a deliberate decision not to include 2 other M districts in Midtown South, one of which is the block between 30th and 31st Street and 7th and 8th Avenue. And I'll just point out that that is the block that the state included in their GPP, the Penn District Plan. And I just want to say personally, I feel like this is a political decision, not a planning decision, to carve out one block to facilitate a state plan that has no city approval process around it. So I'd really like to hear about the rationale and reasoning that city planning wants to turn over that responsibility to the state. And the other area, there's an area south of 23rd Street between 23rd and Union Square, an existing manufacturing district that also is not being included. And I'd like to hear the rationale for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions and for being here with us tonight. Starting with your first question regarding the small portion of manufacturing zoning district that is close to Penn Station between 30th and 31st Street. That piece is not part of the Midtown South plan, specifically because it is within the boundaries of what's called the General Project Plan, the GPP, which is a state initiative, as you mentioned, which essentially overrides local zoning in that area. And when we were developing the boundaries for the Midtown South plan, we wanted to focus specifically on those areas that did not have a planning process that had been undertaken. And as we highlighted during this presentation, the 4 areas that are part of the plan are have zoning in place that's about 50 years old. So not a whole lot of planning attention has been paid to Midtown South in recent memory, whereas there was just a recent planning effort for the block in question that you reference, as well as other areas around Penn Station. So that's the reason why we're not covering it in this plan today. Regarding the other area that you mentioned, which is closer to Union Square, we are really focused on Midtown South in this plan, and is reflected in the name. We wanted to stay with areas that that felt very much of the same piece as one another. And as you begin to move farther south towards 14th Street, towards Union Square, conditions changed, and we felt that it was really important to focus on these M16 zoning districts that characterize Midtown South in particular. That's not to say that the area that you reference, is not one that merits planning attention, but it's just not part of this current effort here. Thank you for your
Okay,
question.
I would just say, again, going back to that M15 district south of Penn Station, it's, I believe, from my point of view, unfortunate that the city is abdicating its planning responsibilities. Even though the state is looking at that as GPP, that may or may not happen. So, there's this fragment that's just kind of sitting there, not being addressed at this point. Could I just ask one other clarification question? There was a mention of a special district, and it wasn't clear to me, are all of these 4 districts considered special districts, or would there be special sub-districts within these 4 districts?
Right. Thank you for that question. We are proposing that the 4 areas that you saw outlined on the map would be part of a single special zoning district that would contain the various unique zoning provisions that Andy walked through in the presentation related to special urban design controls. For example, the way that we can create that kind of customized zoning is through the application of a special zoning district, and the four would have the same special district designation.
So essentially, they would all be special districts, their entirety?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. We're going to move right along to Layla Gisigo. If we could promote Layla now, please. Layla, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good to see everyone. Thank you, Eric, Ezra, and Nabila, and the whole team. I have a couple of questions. The first one, can you actually clarify the transit improvement mechanism? Would that be in addition to the 18 FAR in an R12? And would that generate any affordable housing? Would it be subject to MIH?
Hi, Layla. So yes, the transit improvement bonus would be a bonus on top of the base FAR. So if it was an R12 district, it would be a bonus to the 18 FAR, capped at 20%. And sorry, the second part of the question.
Would the transit bonus be subject to MIH? So
Yes.
Out of this additional density, would you skim 20% for affordable housing?
Right. So the MIH would be calculated based on the total floor area.
Got it. And
sorry, Nabila, not sorry to interject, but with the transit bonus, the additional FAR is not subject to MIH. But with something like a POPs bonus, that additional floor area is subject to MIH. So it's a little different.
Thank you, Andy, for clarifying.
So you can, if you do a transit bonus, then you don't get affordable housing.
For the bonus portion.
Would you, if you were to be in an R12, would you have to use all your FAR? So you could actually choose to stick to, let's say, a 12 FAR and then get your transit bonus. And that would actually reduce the amount of affordable housing that you would be building.
Well, in practice, one wouldn't underbuild to 12 FAR and then pay to get an additional FAR bonus if they could just get that as of right.
Except that the as of right comes with the affordable mandate and the bonus doesn't. But just to move along on how the additional density that is contained in these new zoning districts or new zoning designations that actually currently don't exist, but likely may exist if City of Yes is moving forward. Can you actually speak a little bit about this additional density? Because right now, the FAR is actually capped at 10 for a residential market rate, and then you get an additional 2 FAR, which brings you to the previous cap. So the cap has been lifted, but it was understood that anything in excess of the cap would actually be affordable. So, you would basically, the expectation was that you would stick to a 10 market rate, and then anything above would be affordable. Is that what is going to happen with this proposal? Meaning that if you build a 15 FAR residential building, are you going to get a 10 market rate and 5 affordable?
That's not the way that the zoning districts are structured, nor the way that the FAR cap is being implemented in City of Yes. It's a typical rezoning where you have your standard you have a maximum density that is provided. All applications of R11 and R12 districts are automatically MIH, and it is the standard MIH program that applies to those districts.
But wouldn't you agree then that City of Yes, with mapping these new districts, is actually an upzoning of market rates? Because MIH applies because you're moving from manufacturing to commercial, but you will be able to map it elsewhere, and then it would be an upzoning of market rate housing.
Well, in this particular
essence,
instance where we're rezoning manufacturing districts to allow residential, any rezoning to allow residential automatically triggers MIH. And the goal here, one of the pillars of the plan, as we've talked about, is to take advantage of the tools that came with the lifting of the FAR cap in Albany to be able to maximize the amount of housing that we can introduce into Midtown South, and in neighborhoods that are where that type of housing, high density housing, is particularly appropriate, close to jobs, close to transit. So we do believe that increasing the densities to the 15 FAR or the 18 FAR for residential is particularly appropriate in a neighborhood like Midtown South. And part of that includes market rate housing and also affordable housing. And I think it's worth, emphasizing that the market rate component here is what pays for the permanent income restricted housing, in these buildings in Midtown South, and that is, a critical component of the MIH plan.
And have you done a cost benefit analysis of what it would mean to actually stick to the 10 FAR? Because right now these designations don't exist, and they're being negotiated as part of the City of Yes. So it's immensely useful to understand that this is where they're going to be mapped first. But we want to make sure that the text itself, that City of Yes definition of these new designations actually works to deliver what the city needs. And as it's been pointed in the Q&A, what is needed is actually restricted income affordable housing. This is where the vacancy rate is really low. For a market rate, the vacancy rate is actually not that low.
Yes, understood. And thank you for the comments, Layla. What I'll say is that the fundamental tenet of the mandatory inclusionary housing program is that it is applied consistently across the city, utilizing the same framework of the amount of affordable housing that is required from a percentage basis, and the relationship between that and the AMIs, or the income levels that are targeted, and maintaining that consistency is really critically important for the legal foundation of the MIH program. And we have, in the course of other neighborhood studies, been asked to customize MIH to a particular area, to increase the amount of affordable housing that is required as part of that. And as we've said in the context of those rezonings and also in this one, we really believe that it is fundamentally important that we stick to the mandatory inclusionary housing program as it has been adopted and implemented, and not deviate from that, so as to protect the integrity of that program overall, which is so critically important to be able to provide this income restricted housing.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. Finally, how did you reach the conclusion that a 18 FAR was appropriate for the southeast quadrant, while 15 FAR would be appropriate for the southwest quadrant?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that it really comes down to one of the things that we've said earlier in the process was that we didn't want to look at this entire study area as one single area in terms of what we would be applying in terms of densities and other aspects of the zoning proposal. And I think you see that here, where we're looking at the southeast quadrant distinct from the southwest. And as we talked about in the presentation, as you move particularly to the southwest toward Chelsea, you do see densities decreasing as you move in that direction. And therefore, we did think that it was appropriate to notch down the residential density to the 15 in the southwest, which really is the transition area between Midtown South and the lower density areas of Chelsea. The Southwest is not characterized by that same level of that kind of density drop off as you move south towards Madison Square Park, for example. You're still in a relatively high density environment. You've got a number of large buildings along 6th Avenue and to the east along 5th Avenue and Broadway. So we thought that the higher density was appropriate in the southwest, whereas in the southeast took it down one notch to the 15.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla.
Eric, if I could just make one clarification to Layla's earlier question, I think it would be helpful to just clarify that an R11 district, as proposed in City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, has a base of 12 FAR up and then could be bumped up to 15 with MIH. And then an R12 district is, I believe, a 15 FAR base, and you can bump that up to 18. But because MIH automatically applies here, we only talk about R11 as a 15 FAR and R12 as an 18 FAR. So just adding a little bit more context there.
Thank you, Andy. We weren't lying when we said we wouldn't have necessarily all the answers tonight. Well, Andy has the answers, I think, is the lesson we're drawing tonight. But this is part of the fun of live Q&A. Abby.
Yeah, and along that, we're just getting all the answers from all of our planners tonight. Love it. Okay, so we just thank you, Layla, for all of your questions. As a reminder, we're going to switch back to some written questions just to make sure we're being kind of fair to both styles of questions being asked tonight. So the first one I have written out from our Q&A box is from an anonymous attendee who says, if 20,000 people applied for 50 affordable units in Chelsea, that tells me that this plan must include a lot more than 2,700 units. How can we increase the number of affordable units?
Well, I think I think the point, first of all, thank you for your question. And I think the point that you make really illustrates the dramatic need for housing in our city, and that our demand for housing far outpaces the degree to which we are producing new housing in New York City. And it's a situation which won't be solved overnight, but it is something that a plan like the Midtown South mixed use plan tries to address by introducing these high density residential districts in areas where we feel that they are really most important to be able to maximize the amount of housing that we can create. And would we like to have more housing created? Perhaps, but we are using the tools that are available to us in zoning to really get the maximum here. And we always look for opportunities to go above and beyond what mandatory inclusionary housing can provide by taking advantage of publicly owned sites where more affordable housing can be developed. We're continuing to work with agency partners through this process. Unfortunately, in Midtown South, we do not have an availability of public sites where we could explore opportunities like that. But it is something that is always top of mind for us, and we'll always be looking for opportunities to create additional affordable housing wherever possible. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, Eric. All right, the next question is a bit longer written out. This is from Zul Zolkowitz, who asked, as every speaker has noted so far, and I agree, we must have this higher density residential usage. My question is about creating and maintaining availability to air and light and to green spaces. The implication is that we must have not only green rooftops, but a great deal more green horizontal spaces, green setbacks, and terraces in the architectural design, as well as much greater climate adaptability at ground level, trees interconnected by subsoil corridors, permeable asphalt, and much less concrete and asphalt wherever possible. So is there a related plan that addresses these issues as thoroughly as this plan addresses rezoning?
Thank you for that question. It's a great one, and sustainable and resilient development is important. And what I'll say to that is the way we're proposing our urban design rules within this proposal of talking about activating the street frontage and ensuring that there's a setback above the base of buildings is meant to help create that air and light at the street level. And then with our POPs bonus program, we're hoping to get more open space and more green space. But to your point about green rooftops and terraces, all connected to climate sustainability, we throughout this process, we're working with our partner agencies, and we do value this comment, and we will take it back and talk about how we can create sort of complementary programs that enhance the sustainable development piece of all of this. So thank you.
Thanks, Nabila. All right, our next two folks that we're going to promote in a moment are first going to be George Calderaro, followed by Miriam Fisher. Before we promote George, I just want to note, just in the interest of time, to once again, if you can, please keep your questions, brief and stick to one if possible. Just to make sure that we're getting through as many as possible. We love the enthusiasm. We love how much everyone's jumping in. We just want to make sure we get to everyone who's both written in or raised their hand. All right, so can we promote George now, please? Sorry, George, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, my previous question was answered online, basically questioning the 1.41% vacancy rate. And I established online with Eric that actually that 1.41% is apartments under 2,400 $8. So it's a bit disingenuous to be cited for City of Yes and this. It's actually 3.39% vacancy rate for apartments, generally. It's not great, but it's 1.14 just kind of misrepresents the issue. But my question really is, how is the Department of City Planning and elected officials going to prevent short-sighted developers from just demolishing buildings in anticipation of a zoning change? And it's like, okay, I could build residential, I could charge whatever I want, and then abandoning the project and resulting in another vacant lot in Midtown Manhattan. I live in Midtown Manhattan. I'm on various boards in Midtown Manhattan, and the neighborhood is littered with vacant lots where short-sighted developers and short-sighted city planners, have ideas for something that never happens. And how are you going to prevent this from happening specifically with this proposal, but in general? I mean, you can shoot a cannon from 28th Street to the Empire State Building practically through vacant lots where historic, large, viable buildings were demolished for residential development or other development that never occurred for years. 10 years, the site behind Marble Collegiate Church, the Bancroft building was demolished 10 years ago. It's still a block-wide vacant lot. And I needn't bring up, I hope, the Hotel Pennsylvania, which was with Steve Roth from Vornado, was allowed to demolish without any objections. Those 2,000 rooms with bathrooms could easily have become affordable housing, asylum seeker housing, anything. Yet our community and our city is faced with a vast block-wide vacant lot for the foreseeable future across from the largest transportation center in North America. So
Thank
Eric,
you,
anyone?
George.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. We can respond now.
Thank you, George. Appreciate the question. And, I think that the answer to the question really is that we believe that there is a significant unmet housing need in Midtown South. And I think that you certainly see that in the two blocks Andy mentioned that were rezoned in 2015 in our southwest quadrant, just north of FIT, where limited housing was permitted. And you saw, a very quick and uptake on that, and a substantial amount of housing was built on underbuilt or vacant lots in that area very quickly. So we think that there is, strong demand for people who certainly want to live in Midtown South, and then the people who will want to provide housing for those people in Midtown South. And, I think that, a lot of what you see throughout Midtown South today is a vestige of the 50-year-old zoning in place that does not allow housing. And perhaps, some of the things that you're seeing are, a result of the fact that housing is not permitted, and, other uses, such as office, for example, are not as attractive to develop right now. So, we do think that by rezoning to allow housing for the first time in Midtown South, we have a real opportunity. And, zoning is, we plan for, not just the next 10 years, but, to put zoning on place that lasts for, decades, and, through one cycle and into the next cycle. And, we do feel very confident that, allowing housing for the first time here will result in housing being constructed and created here. Thanks again for your question, though.
Thanks, George. If we can now promote Miriam. Miriam, can you hear us? Miriam, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Great. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm new to this dialogue, and a lot of it is a foreign language to me, but I come as a disability transportation activist and have been very involved in getting more accessibility on 23rd Street. And we did have some success. 7th Avenue is now approved for an elevator. There's also a request to the MTA for 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue. And zoning for accessibility cannot be used to entice the developers to add elevators to the pre-existing subways that are already there, which is what zoning for accessibility is, by offering them specific perks if they add an elevator to the subways that are already in place. And I heard the words, transit, incentivize. What does that mean? Does that apply to the specific area that I'm talking about, which I saw on the original map came off as 23rd Street? And I perked up and I said, let me ask and see if this is a possibility. We just had a rally September 30th with a lot of electeds there to advocate for more elevators on 23rd Street, but 7th Avenue was approved, and we're very pleased because that's the step. There are 5 subways along 23rd Street, but only one currently has an elevator on Park Avenue South, and we argued river to river. That's a long stretch with denying transportation to people with disabilities and seniors and parents with strollers and all of us with bad backs, bad knees, and luggage. Elevators for everyone. So my question is about those specific stops, and what did that mean when Layla referred to incentivized transportation, or I can't recall the words. Where and what does that all mean? Because I don't really know.
Thank you, Miriam, for your question, and thank you for your activism. When we are talking about the transit improvement incentive, we are talking about zoning for accessibility. And so what our proposal aims to do is add the MSMX plan area, so all 4 of those quadrants, within the central business district applicability for ZFA. And what that means is that any station within 1,500 feet of a site within that plan area would qualify for that ZFA bonus. And what I'll also say, so there are several stations that would apply here in the surrounding area. And what I'll say to that is typically MTA's first item for ZFA is to add elevators for that accessibility, in addition to other improvements.
What about the specific stations that I mentioned on 23rd and 8th Avenue, 23rd and 6th Avenue, where there's no current plan
Sure.
for an elevator?
So
and we're pushing for that. Yes, that's a possibility.
It does apply. Yes, it would include 23rd and 8th Avenue and 23rd and 6th.
Okay. 6th Avenue is currently on the list of stations that are to be investigated for accessibility. There are 30 stations on the capital plan that have not been, are open to being investigated, and 6th Avenue, we were told, is one of them. 8th Avenue, I'm not clear what's happening with that.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. And with any,
that's good news to me.
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
And with any ZFA improvement, the property owner would be working with MTA to identify those improvements. So Thank you for your question.
Thank you,
Okay.
Miriam. We love delivering good news when we can. All right, let's switch back to a couple more written questions from the Q&A. Just as a reminder, again, we're grouping similar questions if they come in. So our next question, I'm going to read the one from Brian McFarland, but I also know that we have someone who is anonymous who asked this a similar question. Frampton Tolbert also asked a similar question, as well as Robert Marino. So Brian wrote, it seems like the plan gives preferential treatment to residential development since the relief of the statewide residential FAR cap. Is there anything in the plan that gives some level of deference to ensuring that some level of light manufacturing development continues in the proposed district?
Thank you, Abby, and thanks to I think the four of you who asked this question or a similar question in our Q&A. As we talked about during the presentation, we're trying to create mixed-use districts here where housing and other non-residential uses like manufacturing, commercial office uses, retail can all coexist here together. And the districts that we've proposed with the paired manufacturing and residential districts and the density mix that we've proposed, the 15 FARs, the 18 FARs that you saw, we think really speak to that mixed use character here. We do want to try to, I think, as we've said several times from this call, maximize the opportunities we have for housing on the sites where it's possible to build. For those of you who are familiar with Midtown South, I'm sure almost everybody on this call is intimately familiar with these four areas that we're looking at as part of the plan. They're built with a lot of buildings today, a lot of really big buildings today. So the opportunities for new construction are relatively limited. And, we think that on those sites where new construction can take place, being able to build new residential is particularly desirable. And so you see that reflected in the density mix that we're proposing. It does have residential densities placed a little bit higher than the manufacturing densities, the manufacturing district densities, which is non-residential uses. But really, the two are on a very equal playing field. A 15 FAR for non-residential uses is a substantial amount of density to be provided for non-residential uses. And of course, you have the existing building landscape throughout Midtown South, where, as you saw in the presentation, you've got many buildings that already are in place today, older historic buildings that far exceed the 15 FAR or the 18 FAR that we're proposing. And those buildings, are buildings that, because they exceed the densities that we're talking about today, are very likely to stay in place, be either continue the use that are in them today, converted to new uses like offices, for example, or be converted to residential use. And we think that there's a part to play for all of those scenarios in Midtown South. Thanks again for the questions.
Great. Thanks, Eric. The next question is from Mike Greeley, who asks, why are there 4 quadrants instead of 1 or 2 large areas? If restrictions against large buildings converting to housing, why exclude these quote unquote middle areas?
Great question. So the reason for the 4 quadrants in our plan area is because these are the areas where there is currently the manufacturing zoning districts, and these zoning districts do not allow housing today, whereas the areas in between the 4 quadrants are mostly zoned commercial, which allows both mixed use developments, including residential as well as commercial uses already today. And so what we're hoping to do is take those 4 quadrants that have old manufacturing zoning and rezone them to allow for the mixed uses that we see in the surrounding area. And most importantly, what this proposal will allow us to do is to also map mandatory inclusionary housing in these 4 quadrants so that we can also see more affordable housing come online in this area.
Great. Thank you, Nabila. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee who asks, are there height limits?
Thank you for that short and to the point question. I'll note that today, under the existing zoning, there are not height limits within Midtown South, and we are not proposing height limits as part of this plan. As we presented during the presentation, we are proposing strong urban design controls for new buildings that speak to how new buildings feel when you are a pedestrian on the street. And what we think is most important, and what we've heard really loud and clear during our public and stakeholder engagement efforts, is that people feel very strongly that buildings should come to meet the street line. Unlike some of the hotels that are present in the plan area today that pull back from the street, people really want buildings that meet the street line. People feel that the loft character of parts of this plan area is something that they really cherish, and we agree with that. So we think that strong urban design controls that require buildings to meet the street line, require them to rise between 6 and 15 stories in height before setting back, is really the most critical piece of shaping how buildings look in Midtown South. We are balancing the desire to provide for housing opportunity here, to get as much housing as we can here, to reflect the existing densities that are present in the area today, with, again, wanting to ensure that when you're a person on the street, that new buildings feel very much part and parcel of Midtown South.
Thanks, Eric. And thank you to Brian. And I now see Carrie has her hand raised as well, for your patience as we worked through a lot of written questions that have come in. So we have our last 2 folks at this time who have raised their hands. Of course, if anyone else would still like to raise their hand, they're welcome to. But great CB4 representation here tonight. We have Brian Weber, who has his hand raised, followed by Carrie Keenan. So can we please promote Brian first? Brian, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you see me?
Am
I on?
You're on. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for this presentation. I've been to a few of the other informational sessions along the way. I want to say that I really appreciate that you heard residents and community input about the importance of the existing built environment, preserving the characteristics of the manufacturing loft. I myself live in a converted manufacturing loft, so I have a appreciation for that. But I am concerned about the conversation around density and residential FAR of 18 and commercial of 15. Yes, it is true that majority of this area is overbuilt in terms of FAR, but my question to you is, one of the things that came out of the community conversations is the desire for people to convert the existing buildings into residential, but not see the demolition of these buildings for new buildings that are built as residential. My concern is that with the proposed FAR of 1518, it will incentivize developers to do just that, to demolish the existing loft buildings, which are unique in this congregation, in this area, for new buildings. So how does one address that? Also, I just want to throw this out to DCP. I don't know if this is something you can do for future presentations. 1518 is pretty abstract in the context of this environment. It might be helpful to give some graphic representation of what a massing of 18 FAR residential would look on a proposed site. So that's one thing. And the last thing I want to mention is about the POPs bonus. Page 2 of your presentation shows a POPs that runs from 29th Street to 30th Street behind the Aventi Hotel. You should know that that POPs is a perpetual problem for the community and for the hotel that it was built for, in that it has presented significant public safety challenges that we are in countless meetings trying to address. And when the building owner complains about those, we always do remind them that they did receive the bonus for that POPs, but as a community, we've been suffering for it. So acknowledging that we need more public space, accessible green space, where do you envision these POPs going in a largely built environment, unless we're looking to fell some of these manufacturing loft buildings and build new buildings in their place? So I know there's a bunch of questions packed into one there, but you guys are really good at this point. So.
Thanks, Brian. Very great questions. I'll start with your density related questions. So what I'll say is our environmental review is taking a look at likely sites that would be redeveloped. The environmental review is also looking at and anticipating conversions. But in terms of new construction, we're really anticipating those to generally occur on empty or underbuilt lots. And we all know environmental review seeker is not, a magic uh, predictor of the future. But really, we are sort of seeing that it's most likely that new construction would occur on these more underbuilt sites. And as you noted, much of the area is densely built. We see buildings that are exceeding 18 FAR in the plan area itself. And, you know, there's sort of a nuanced calculation to be made in terms of demolition versus conversion. And typically in this area, demolition of large buildings can be quite costly.
But I
I'll
just
also,
want to note there, just for you, is that we have seen demolition of these large manufacturing loft buildings, the very ones you're talking about converting to residential. If you look at
Mhm.
37th and 6th, there was an empty lot in a very large manufacturing loft building. And rather than converting the loft building, the developer decided to tear it down. And we're now getting, and this goes back to the previous question about height, we're getting a tower on 6th and 37th that's, I think, 600 feet plus tall,
Mhm.
which is dramatically out of character with the rest of the built environment around it. You look at I believe 39th Street, Sam Chang infamously dropped one of the loft buildings there and combined it with an adjacent lot to build a very large hotel. So I would say
Sure.
that we should anticipate that happening. And is there anything that can be looked at to prevent that from happening, yet achieving your goals?
Mhm.
So it's just food for thought, and
Sure. No, it's a good flag. And what I will say, and of course acknowledging that, sometimes you have examples where that occurred. But there are, you know, the loft typology buildings that, provide floor plates that are easier to adapt to residential compared to sort of the 1970s and 80s office
Mhm.
buildings, which have a lot more constraints. And, any any conversions would be able to apply to the new tax abatements, the 467M. And so we do feel like that is also a great incentive for conversions here in terms of balancing that out with new construction. That's why we're proposing these urban design rules that talk about having a strong street wall, as well as a setback above the base between 6 and 15 stories to sort of embrace that loft typology when you're experiencing these buildings at the street level. Um, but appreciate your concern. And I'll move on to the second piece, which is POPs. We are aware of the POPs you're referring to. And, what I'll say is, firstly, just want to acknowledge that the quality of life issues experienced in the neighborhood today, we've heard a lot about it, and do want to acknowledge that. And in terms of POPs, there are hundreds of POPs throughout Manhattan, and we have seen many successful spaces in many different neighborhoods. But in terms of assuring the quality of spaces, any new POPs coming online through this proposal would be subject to discretionary review at the department. And the reason for varying quality of POPs that you see and experience has something to do with the evolution of the POPs design regulations in zoning. So in the past, things like seating, location, orientation, and other amenities weren't detailed or required in the zoning. But new POPs are subject to our current regulations, which require design rules that are meant to enhance safety and visibility, as well as just to make these spaces pleasant to be in. And that includes, no longer allowing elevated or sunken plazas and having maximum heights of planters and other obstructions so that views are clear into the space. And importantly, requiring primary building entrances to be located directly on the POPs themselves or immediately adjacent, just to show that direct ownership, as well as visibility. And so
That doesn't always work, unfortunately. 8th Avenue 525 and 585, two problematic POPs, and those were height bonuses or FAR bonuses for hotel projects. And I know you guys have, in subsequent rounds of planning, plugged those loopholes, but those have sight lines and direct entrance off the park, and that's causing a significant problem now because they can't shutter those parks at night. So anyway, these are just, issues that are pragmatic and what we deal with
sure,
living with
and
them.
we appreciate that. And I will note just on that piece, coming back to sort of the safety concerns, something we've heard throughout our engagement is that with the addition of housing here, we'd be adding an active residential population that would activate the neighborhood during after work hours, for example. And that 24/7 neighborhood we're aiming for here, could naturally add more eyes onto the street, and create safer spaces. You can imagine someone coming out of their building late at night to walk their dog, etc. So that level of activity we've seen in other neighborhoods and have heard from stakeholders would improve the public realm here. But thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Thank you for.
Thanks, Brian and Nabila. I'm just noting it's a little after 8:20 now. Originally, we said we were going to conclude at 8:30. We can extend a bit, but we do have about 4 folks with their hands raised. We also have several questions we want to get to in the chat. So I'm going to ask that anyone coming off mic, just in the interest of time and to make this fair for everyone, please, keep your question or comment brief, and we will try and get through just as many as we can before we wrap up this evening. All right, so can we promote Carrie right now, please? Carrie, can you hear us?
Hi, I can. Thank you for the hi. Thanks for the presentation and the conversation. I just want to, I'm also following up on POPs uh and the street wall because I'm a bit confused by the presentation. And Nabila, I did put a question in the chat. I think my question was, so as I think Layla asked for clarification, there are 4 new special districts or 1 new special district that includes 4 boxes.
1 new special district, including
Okay.
4 boxes.
And then in addition to that, you had that 5th kind of in-house kitchen on the northwest box, that gray box. And when you were talking about the street wall and POPs, well, you didn't mention POPs, but the street wall, that's what you had kind of up on the screen at that time. So I was confused about whether that additional area to the special district was the only place that you were guaranteeing that uniform street wall. Because as you've heard now, and as you've heard from Community Board 4, we have big concerns about POPs. And then when you make it a, bonusable, I guess, I don't want to say gift, but perk, it feels as though POPs are being encouraged. And sorry, hey, family, can you be quiet for a second? So if you could just speak to that, because I also heard Eric say that people want buildings that meet, the street wall. But it seems like sometimes that's fine. In some of the boxes, it's fine. And some of them, maybe not so much. So can you just explain that, or maybe in the next presentation, make sure to explain that?
Sure. Well, we're happy to explain it now, Carrie. And
Great.
And thank you for
Thank you
the question. And
Thank you.
I recognize that it's confusing when we're talking about kind of these 4 discontiguous areas. And I feel your work from home pain. I think we've all been there recently, over the past several years. But to be clear about this, the 4 areas that will be part of the special district, the street wall controls will apply throughout those 4 areas. So, really the entirety of the area where we're proposing zoning changes will be a new special district and will have these street wall controls. It will at the same time allow for POPs. And I know that, we've heard some confusion about what that means to have street wall controls apply with buildings coming out and meeting the street line, but then also allowing plazas, for example, that have to have somewhere to go, right? And and so they kind of occupy that space. And we do really think there's a role for both of those to work together in Midtown South, to really emphasize the importance of street wall controls overall in Midtown South on certain sites that can meet the requirements of being able to provide privately owned public spaces like plazas, for example, which have kind of minimum dimensions that apply, orientations, you can't locate them only on a north facing site where the plaza would be dark. There is a role for these. And again, we heard during the public engagement process, the strong need for there to be improvements to the public realm, including additional public space here. And we can try to accomplish some of that, with things like DOT is doing along Broadway, for example, but we think there's a really important role to play on private properties as well. As Nabila mentioned, we also know very well from talking to you and during our engagement process that a lot of these spaces have pretty challenging conditions today, and don't feel safe for people, or may have other issues related to quality of life. Absolutely acknowledging that. Frankly, it's something that I think we need to continue as this moves through the process, to talk to the community that experiences this area on a daily basis about, to learn more about, and to develop some strategies with our agency partners. There are some things that zoning does really well, and then other things that, it's not particularly tuned to address. And so that's where we really do look to our agency partners to provide help there, and we'll continue to do so through the process. But as it stands right now, we really do think there's a role to play for POPs working together with street wall controls to enhance the overall built and open space, built environment and open space within Midtown South. As Nabila also said, we think that simply creating mixed use communities here, having people on the streets in the evening, having the types of services that meet the needs of residents, things like restaurants and stores, that come naturally with introducing residents to an area, does a lot, frankly, I think, to enhance public safety, enhance feelings of public safety, address, these conditions on the street. Is it going to be a perfect solution? No, I don't think so. And that's where, again, our work with our partner agencies kind of will be particularly important. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Eric. All right. We're going to try and get through several more written questions right now, just in the interest of time. So the next one I have is from Max Goodstein, who asks, how many light manufacturing businesses exist in the zone today? Has that amount been steadily falling, or has that number plateaued?
Thank you for that question. So I don't have the number of businesses in particular for manufacturing use, but I do have the number of manufacturing jobs, which are around 3,474 jobs today. And out of those jobs, fashion manufacturing has declined 60% in the last decade, but other manufacturing businesses have or jobs have stayed stable. And what I'll sort of add to that is that's why we're proposing these mixed use zoning districts where we're pairing manufacturing with residential use so that not only is housing permitted going forward, but we're allowing manufacturing jobs to remain here and allowing them to grow and expand. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabila. All right, next we have a couple of questions about parking. And again, we've grouped them together. So we had one from Fapola Docolari, and apologies if I mispronounce your name, and Paolo Ribeiro. So I'm going to read Fapola's question, which they note they're a planner in New York City, and one of the major concerns they have in this area is mobility, particularly public parking. What proposals are being considered to address parking needs for residents, as well as for visitors and workers who use the area daily?
Thank you for the question. And I'll just note some of the other written questions regarding parking. We're asking if their parking was going to be required, kind of a similar theme around addressing the parking needs of this area, and would we be requiring parking? And I'll say that we will not be requiring parking within Midtown South, as is true really for all of central Manhattan, lower Manhattan. Parking is not required today, and we would not be proposing to change that going forward. And really comes down to a few factors. Number one, this is probably the most transit accessible area in Manhattan, really in the city, perhaps, both with the density of subway lines that pass through this area and intersect in this area and provide transfer opportunities. You look at Harold Greeley Square subway station, for example, but also the presence of Penn Station, the hemisphere's busiest train station, the Port Authority bus terminal, our largest bus terminal in the nation, all located in Midtown South or just steps away, literal steps away from the plan area that we've been talking about tonight. So number one, this area is incredibly accessible. And, if there's really any area where a car is not necessary, it's in Midtown South. And, we really think that the plan should reflect that and reflect that transit, walking, and bicycles should be the primary way that people are moving around. And obviously for hire vehicles, taxis as well. So we're not going to plan to require parking in this area. And, this is something that our City of Yes for Housing Opportunity initiative, which is, currently working its way through the public review process, is also addressing on a citywide basis, in acknowledgement of the fact that so much of our city is transit accessible, and also that requiring parking imposes a really significant cost on buildings, and particularly on residential buildings. And that very often what you see is buildings that are mandated to provide parking. It comes at the cost of being able to provide more housing or provide more affordable housing for New Yorkers. So we really think that the combination of transit accessibility and wanting to maximize housing opportunity point to not requiring housing in this area. Of course, you are permitted to provide parking if it is something that an individual property owner or developer feels is an important component of a residential project. It's not prohibited within the area. So we think that there is a role for parking in some developments, but not requiring it. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. The next question is from David Sigmund, who writes, has DCP identified any parcels that could be developed as open space or pocket parks? Could the City of Yes wider development rights transfer concept apply to those parcels? Also, has there been any consideration of creating an Avenue 7.5 to distribute rush hour pedestrian traffic between Penn Station and the Port Authority bus terminal?
Thank you for the questions. Firstly, I'll start with, unfortunately, there aren't city-owned sites within the plan area where open space could be located. But what I will say is there are some great parks and plazas immediately adjacent to the area, including Herald and Greeley Squares and Madison Square Park. And I'll note that part of developing this neighborhood plan is thinking through capital and programmatic improvements and investments. And so throughout this process, we're going to be talking to our agency partners like DOT and Parks to work closely to find more opportunities for public realm improvements, including the existing open space resources we have, like Herald and Greeley Squares. In regards to sort of more streetscape and pedestrian improvements between Penn Station and Port Authority bus terminal, what I can say is there are many plans in the works, including Penn GPP, but also the Port Authority bus terminal has recently gotten City Planning Commission approval for a large-scale renovation to the facility, and that includes a lot of streetscape and pedestrian improvements that we'll be seeing come online in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Nabila. All right, we're going to try and squeeze in our last raised hand. And if we have time after that, just a couple more written questions before we wrap up here. Next, I'd like to call on Jesse Fan, if we can promote Jesse. Jesse, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you
Go
guys hear
right
me?
ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so really appreciate everything all of you are doing. I know it's not necessarily the easiest job trying to work through communities asked, but one of the things that, I've been a long time resident in the area. One of the things that I've really noticed now having a young family here is obviously the crime, homelessness, and drug use. And I totally get, the rezoning may help with more residents in the area and having folks, I think one example is like having people walk the dog, but is there something that's getting done now to sort of address all this? Because there's certainly pockets here where you certainly have enough density of people and you still see a ton of homelessness, ton of drug use, a ton of crime. It's all reported and none of it's getting acted upon. So just curious what more is getting done now, because if all this great work gets pushed through, at least in my humble opinion, it's all a bit for naught because you still have an area that's rampant with drug use and homelessness and crime. So just curious what more you can push the agencies to help kind of get more of this fixed now rather than just wait for the rezoning to fully happen so we can sort of accelerate some of this.
Thanks, Jesse. Really appreciate the comment. And as we've said, we acknowledge that there are serious quality of life concerns in this area, that you've got pretty challenging condition on some of these streets and sidewalks in Midtown South, something we've heard through the process. And we, as we said, or as Abby said at the start of the Q&A, we're not going to have all the answers right here out of the gate tonight, but this is a really important one where we want to continue to listen to the concerns through the process. I will note that there are some initiatives which are underway right now in this community and elsewhere in Midtown, and that includes the Midtown Community Improvement Coalition, which is an umbrella organization that's bringing together community groups, government agencies, law enforcement to address these public safety and quality of life issues in Midtown. It's obviously an ongoing body of work that has to kind of continue to take place over time and needs to respond to the varying quality of life challenges in different areas, which can range, from everything from scaffolding, illegal cannabis shops, mental health and substance abuse issues, on streets and sidewalks. There's a wide range of issues which are kind of being tackled simultaneously. Yeah. And, I think it's a good start, but, I think as we all know, it's not the only step here. And we're going to continue listening through the process. And again, these neighborhood plan efforts like the Midtown South mixed use plan are the opportunity for not just city planning to come to the table, but for the wide range of city agencies that intersect with local communities to hear concerns and to help to develop strategies to implement within neighborhoods. Zoning is one piece of it. Yeah. And it's an important piece of it. It's the one that we specialize in here, but it's certainly not the only part of addressing a neighborhood holistically. So we're going to keep listening and keep working on this.
Yeah, fair enough. No, appreciate that. And hopefully we'll see kind of continued improvement in the area, because it's always tough to see, the drug use and, people really conked out on the street, especially on 8th Avenue, on 36th, and people trying to wipe windows to the cars. And it's just this constant battle. So, yeah, no, appreciate you guys taking the question and look forward to seeing the area get better. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse. Always good to have a resident attending one of these sessions. All right, so we're going to switch back to our written questions, and we have one from Ji Zhu, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. 467M program has set various deadlines for landowners/developers to get DOB approval in order to start the conversion process, the earliest of which offers the most tax benefit will be before July 1st, 2026. How can the office owners in the MSMX district expect to deal with this timing, since MSMX rezoning will likely take more than a year, which would put us to the end of 2025 and early 2026. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of timing for MSMX, as we noted, we're hoping to kick off the ULERT process end of this year or early next year. And what that means is we would get to approval sort of mid 2025. And so essentially, if a property owner can make the deadline before July 2026, they will be able to take advantage of the most generous tax benefit. Otherwise, property owners will be able to still utilize the other 467M options. Thank you.
Thanks, Nabila. And unfortunately, we're almost 15 minutes over, and that's going to have to be our last question of the evening. I apologize for everyone who we didn't get to in the chat or in the Q&A box, excuse me. But you know, we are about to share some ways to stay involved, and you know, we really encourage you to continue to engage with us and reach out if your question wasn't answered tonight, or you know, continue to ask it in future engagement processes. All right, so again, I want to just thank everyone for your time and your insights and your thoughtful comments. We're going to take it to our next steps in the process from here. So as always, we at DCP rely on your input and feedback to build a successful MSMX plan. So let's keep this conversation going. Like I just said, most importantly, you can stay engaged via our website. All resources can be found at www.midtownsouthplan.nyc, where you can explore summaries of past engagement events, revisit this presentation, or watch previous public sessions, and sign up for updates to stay informed on all MSMX developments. We post upcoming dates on our site, so keep an eye out for key milestones like the certification date. And as always, you are welcome to reach out to us with any questions at Midtown South Plan at planning.nyc.gov. And with that, we conclude tonight's info session. On behalf of the entire MSMX team, thank you again for joining us. We're excited about the conversations and community input that will shape the future of Midtown South, and look forward to your continued involvement in the public review process for MSMX. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.